Thank you so much, Molly, and thank you everyone for joining here today. I am honored to be able to help facilitate what's going to be a very exciting conversation. So this webinar we've called Small is Mighty. It's a topic that stemmed from work that we published in our Canada City Parks report just this summer. And this is the second of our annual reports. It looks at trends and challenges over 27 cities across Canada. And in that report, we focus on the powerful impacts of small-scale urban biodiversity projects among many really engaging and urgent current projects and topics around parks. So the work that we collected mines city data and shares reports and stories happening from all across the country. And we also published an online biodiversity resource library that is accessible to you. There we've linked research from all over the country, including reports and Canadian city strategies and planning documents, how this issue is being addressed municipally. And you can find all of that at Canada City Parks Report. Sorry, cityparksreport.parkpeople.ca. And Molly will put that in the chat window there for you to it at any moment. So several of our panelists today were also featured in that report, and I'm really excited to bring them all together here for this great conversation. So let me introduce you to our wonderful panelists, and then we'll dive right into conversation and pass the floor to them. So we have from Toronto, Mahnaz Ghalib from the Dallington Pollinators Community Garden Project. So she's passionate about the environment and works on innovative and sustainable solutions through community participation. And her journey to restore urban landscapes and promote outdoor environmental education was what ultimately founded the Dallington Community Garden Project. And for 8 years, she's been working on this, along with her co-volunteers, and really growing community membership and youth engagement in organic gardening and environmental stewardship. So we very much look forward to hearing from Mahnaz. We have from the West Coast, Carmen Rosen, who's an interdisciplinary visual artist and performer. She has a long history of initiating art projects and creative community integrated projects that have resulted in the enrichment of school programs, community enhancement, and ongoing creative work, engaging communities in art, the environment, and empowering people to become involved and active. She is the artistic director of the Still Moon Arts Society that hosts all kinds of beautiful events in BC. And we're super honored to have you and all of your expertise and energy with us today too. We have from back here in Toronto, Nina Marie Lister, who's the graduate program director at the School of Urban Planning at Ryerson University. In her research, she teaches and practices and centers her work on the confluence of landscape, infrastructure, and ecological processes within contemporary metropolitan regions, with a particular focus on resilience and adaptive system design. She's also the director of the Ecological Design Lab, a collaborative innovation incubator for ecological design, research, and practice, and tends her own local plant garden. And we have from Montreal, Park People's own development lead, Caroline Magar, and she is a landscape architect and member of the AAPQ, that's the Architectural Association of Quebec, Landscape Architecture of Quebec. Caroline also brings a deep knowledge of Montreal's professional, municipal, and community networks, as well as an over 10-year experience in multidisciplinary urban design and work with the Park People team. She was also the development coordinator for 5 years with a park friends group, Les Amis du Champ des Possibles, which translate into the Field of Dreams, which she will tell you all about. It's an old train yard that was a vacant lot and rezoned into a biodiversity conservation park in a very dense urban neighborhood in Montreal. So we welcome Caroline, Carmen, Nina Marie, and Mahnaz, and I'll pass the floor over to you. So Mahnaz, maybe we will start with you, and maybe to get the conversation kicked off, we'll get each of you to introduce yourselves by talking to us about the greatest impacts that you've seen in small-scale urban biodiversity projects and how this manifests in your work and your interests. So Mahnaz, I'll pass the floor to you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for the introduction, Kelsey. So I'll just first of all like to thank Park People for inviting us to this amazing webinar and for giving us the opportunity to talk about our own individual projects and journeys. This year has been especially a very, very challenging year for everyone because of the pandemic, and a lot of things became obvious. And one of the things was we realized our connection to nature and how important it has to be, the resilience that we need to build in our systems, and just to have strong community partnerships going forward. So let me just walk you through a little background about how I got involved with the community garden project. Maybe if we can have the slide on, the first slide. Is it Molly who will be handling it? Okay. So when I was moved into my house and I had this front yard and backyard, I used to be busy, pulling away the weeds in my garden just to make it look like acceptable within the within my neighborhood. And it turned out to be really backbreaking work for me. And I started reading about a lot of environmental issues that were affecting us, and I felt like I needed to do something different, and I wanted to bring about a change in the community as well. So I asked the city for a community garden in our neighborhood. None of them existed over here on public land in Ward 33, and everything seemed to be in downtown. So eventually, with the support and help of our counselor, some amazing neighbors and community members, a grant from Walmart, Evergreen, and Toronto Parks and Recs, we got a garden established in 2013. The garden was divided into three components, and the first component was of a food garden where we would teach people how to grow organic food sustainably, and to have a teaching learning circle. So maybe we can move to the next slide. And the third component was to have a native garden space, so where we would grow native plants, and that would serve as an educational tool for people. That would be sort of a habitat for the biodiversity that existed within the space. And slowly over the years, maybe we can skip to the next slide, we started realizing that a lot of things that we were doing, the main things that attracted people were having food around on like movie nights and pumpkin walks and workshops, and having some great thought exchange through educational workshops. And a lot of the stuff that worked for us was getting some micro grants from the community. We got a micro grant from Park People last 2 years, and we've been able to hand out seeds for native plants and heirloom seeds for vegetables, and it serves as an educational tool for people as well. And in fall we had a design competition, garden design competition, get people thinking how to incorporate different sustainable, even if it's a small space within your front yard, how to incorporate the design in the garden, and build small habitats within your own proximate space. So let's move to the next slide. Then we started building partnerships with the neighborhood school, and we since the last 3 years we've been having this garden school club, where I feel that you start small, plant the seeds in the child's mind, and they grow up as natural stewards, and they care about the land, they care about things around them. They become caring adults. So that was one of the main reasons we got the school involved and engaged. And last year we had an amazing opportunity that came our way for a mural project. And now we have this amazing, gorgeous, larger than life pollinator mural overlooking our garden on the school wall. And it sort of magnifies, it magnifies all the pollinators that and the biodiversity that exists within our neighborhood and within the garden. So a lot of pollinators that are up there, they are from pictures that we took from the garden, are volunteers. So it's an amazing, powerful tool to create awareness, to teach people. And we then introduced a few of, maybe if you skip to the next slide, we asked for a solution for, the rainwater runoff, because the land we live on is, it is marked by former tributaries of the Don River. And we thought, why not harvest the rainwater and use it suitably for irrigation or something. So now finally this year it has been, the project has been installed, and I will share with park people the pictures that we have next year when the opening takes place, hopefully when everything is clear. And this will showcase a few low-tech solutions for people to use within the homes as well. There are 3 ways to collect rainwater. So moving on, I'll just show you guys, I think that this is the project I was talking about, the Mural project, which serves as a great educational tool building awareness for children, for the school, and for the community at large. And I feel in closing, I'd just like to say that those were the partners that we have been working with, which the amazing people that we've been working with. I just like to say that the journey has introduced me to a lot of learning about the land. I had no idea about the land, the rivers, the lost rivers, nothing. But I have learned all of that. I've learned that protecting small spaces is important because it becomes an integrated network that will support and connect the larger corridors that run in our amazing, Toronto region. So I feel that small is mighty. Thank you.
Oh gosh, Mahnaz, thank you so much for tying all your own personal learnings into this great network of impacts of your urban biodiversity spaces. We're going to travel to the other side of Canada now and let you guys be introduced to Carmen Rosen from Still Moon Arts Society.
Hi, everyone. So I'm here on the unceded territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam First Nations, and we don't have treaties in most of British Columbia, so the land is still unceded and still in big contention. And when I moved into my neighborhood in East Vancouver, in the year 2000, I was completely fascinated by Renfrew Ravine, which was in our neighborhood. That was this beautiful stream that was really kind of uncared for. There was a ravine committee, but there were a lot of people dumping garbage into the ravine, and there was a lot of problems with it. So my approach to helping out the ravine was to, yes, join the ravine committee cleanups, but also to take what I did as an artist to maybe change people's perception of the ravine as a place of beauty and a place of sacredness, so that we didn't have to pull out so much new garbage all the time because people's attitudes would change. So I'm just gonna do a bit of screen sharing and just show a couple of images of various crazy things we've done. So the first one that I'll show is a feature of Renfrew Ravine Moon Festival. We started in 2003, so this year was our 18th annual Moon Festival. And we hire a lot of artists and musicians to come and completely animate the ravine with live music and lantern installations. And we have youth-led performances. And so with 18 years of the Moon Festival, we've ended up with a lot of people starting to really care about Renfrew Ravine and Still Creek. And then as a result, the Still Creek watershed, which then as a result ends up in being the watershed awareness in general. And then I'll show you another shot, which is other crazy projects we've done. This is, we did a project called Birds on Parade, and I collaborated with a couple of other great artists, Robbie Smith, Paula Jardine, and Kathy Stubbington. And we did a 2-year project with the International Ornithological Congress and got community members from all over the city to make bird costumes of real birds and then inhabit their birds for a large bird parade to open the International Ornithological Congress with thousands of people in downtown Vancouver. And these are some of the youth that were doing the Canada Day celebration with us. So here's all the people and their birds. And they had to learn from ornithologists how the birds act and moved in order to create their costumes and inhabit their characters. So that's, and then I'm gonna share one. So we, this one was, we also did a whole project where we did bike rides following the creek so people could see where the creek went from Vancouver into Burnaby and then into the Fraser River. And we had characters called fish out of water characters, which were those characters that were looking for their lost streams in the neighborhood. So these fish out of water characters would walk upstream looking as if they were salmon, ghost salmon trying to spawn in their neighborhood, and people would come upon them. So that's another one of our crazy art projects. And then I'll show you a more recent one. And we did a project called Fruiting Bodies because I've started collaborating with a mycologist. Are you seeing the mushrooms sprouting? Yeah, so this is, I started collaborating with mycologist Willoughby Arevalo, and so we started doing weaving with invasive species that we killed. So it was ivy plus some willow branches, and we wove a salmon shape, and then we stuffed it with mushroom spawn, oyster mushroom spawn, so that it could grow and fruit and decay the ivy in a natural fashion, plus also build the soil, so it's improving soil quality as part of the process. So in addition to all the stewardship stuff we do all this art projects that relate to stewardship as well as the biodiversity. And the result is that we have salmon spawning in our creek. They hadn't been there for 80 years, and for 5 years in a row, they were spawning in the Vancouver portion of Still Creek, and then they took a 3-year break, and then this year they were back there again and spawning in our creek. So that's a big change. We're part of hundreds, thousands of people that have been working on the miraculous change over 30 years, but we're one little piece of it that's raising the profile of that. So.
Oh, that's just wonderful, Carmen.
Yeah.
Well, and what extraordinary outcomes and impacts of this collaborative work. And I love the value of humor and art and adding sacredness to the spaces, and how that helps impact and engage people. Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing. We will hear from Nina Marie Lister next from the School of Urban Planning at Ryerson University in Toronto.
Thank you so much. I just should say very quickly that I've been having, for some reason, weird connectivity issues. So if I disappear, I will reappear. I'm toggling between a computer and a phone. So let's hope this connection stays, and we'll just adapt as we go along. Thank you so much for asking me to join you today. What a wonderful group of people on your panel, and the range and impact of storytelling, of activation projects is truly impressive. I'm going to share with you something a little bit different. As was introduced in the introduction, I'm the director and founder of the Ecological Design Lab at Ryerson University, where we train the next generation of planners, sometimes landscape architects and architects as well. So we're very interested in activating the connection, the spatial connections between people and their special places, parks and gardens, and of course, those green spaces that sustain life on Earth. We're most interested in the broadest way of connecting people to nature in our cities, and doing that physically as well as attitudinally and in their behaviors. This has been mentioned a couple of times already by various panelists, and I think it's really important to emphasize that it's one thing to change perception, it's another to change attitudes, and quite another to change behaviors. That's the hardest shift. And I've seen some really impressive examples already of the ways in which that's happening. We study this and we try to activate it. The Ecological Design Lab within the School of Urban and Regional Planning is really focused on 3 broad areas of research activation, and that's the emphasis that I'll make for his activation. The first is landscape connectivity, so the functional connections between those places that sustain biodiversity, pollination, and all of the ecosystem, quote unquote, services that you've heard about. But for us, those are also services that people provide back to nature and the green spaces around us. We also work in the area of resilience, so what it means functionally, physically, empirically to understand resilience, so adaptation to change, sometimes transformation under duress and change as we're facing right now. And then finally, we're very interested in specific designs for green infrastructure, living landscapes, the connection to green roofs, living walls, bioswales, green streets, rain gardens, individual gardens that connect up to public places in cities. And so these 3 broad areas for us are, for my students and for research assistants in our funded research projects, they're all about working hands-on, experientially with people in communities. We always say we work with and in our communities of practice. And this is principally understanding that we don't necessarily only interested in large, huge master plans and grand schemes for coastal resilience, but actually small acupuncture projects that open up and leverage change across scales. And that's very important to say. It's not just scaling up, but the connections between people and their relationships to places. So this is very much about relational ecology, if you will. I hope that's not too terribly academic, but just to give you a little sense of what happens in our professional lives, it sometimes must be reflected in our personal lives. So I'll just share with you very quickly for the last 2 minutes, maybe a couple of images of my own garden, which quite unintended has recently suddenly pushed me into a place where I needed to defend my own garden for the purposes of pollination and biodiversity. So if I may share my screen with you, I'll just show you a couple of images of my Hillcrest meadow in downtown Toronto that, through unintended consequences, actually became a place of design activism, we might say. This is just a few slides from this selection. It was cheekily called by Alex Bezikovic, the architecture critic in the Globe and Mail, a challenge to law and order, because of course in my home, I don't have a lawn, I have a meadow that is renaturalizing and has been the subject of 5 years of the labor of love. In my community, I think it's important to say, as an academic, I also try to walk that proverbial talk. Here is my community from the air, shot by drone. It's a corner lot that has, at some places, a 20 to 30 degree slope, which isn't a very practical place for a lawn. But we chose to work with friends and colleagues to renaturalize, to reintroduce native species, more than 12 species of shrubs, 12 shrubs and trees in total, and more than 40 herbaceous flowering perennials that serve a variety of needs that range from beauty to pollination, birds, moths, butterflies, even bats, we're very pleased to say, in this kind of lush oasis that, as it turned out, some of our neighbors didn't enjoy very much. So we were actually the subject of a bylaw complaint, and the municipal standards and licensing folks told us we had to mow down our pollinating meadow. And this received rather more press than I had ever intended. It wasn't a research project, it was just a personal endeavor. And what this showed me, I think, was a very important reminder that design activism or planning activism for those of us who are in the academic world is just as important. So we've been working very hard to capture people's attention. And in this last image, I'll just say, we challenged the Mayor Tory, to a cup of tea and a tour of the garden. And in that conversation, which was very productive and actually quite supportive, we argued that, look, if in my academic world with the lab, we worked very hard to support biodiversity initiatives across the city and policy, why not do it in the garden? Why not connect the left and the right hand and make sure the city is actually positioned to support local people in bringing together the small places of our private gardens and yards together with the large mosaic of green spaces in the city that together create a landscape that's connected and sustains us.
Thank you, Nina Marie, so much for sharing all your teachings, but also your own personal story and how you've connected them so graciously, and then challenged the mayor himself to connect their intentions and strategies with on the ground action. And that leads so wonderfully into the work of Caroline in the Champ des Possibles. So I'll pass the floor to you.
Thanks, Kelsey. Hi, everyone. So happy to be part of this panel. So let me just share my screen because I'll go right through. I'm a visual person, so I think images will talk by themselves. But 1 second, sorry, I haven't shared my screen. Okay, here we go. Share and present. Can everyone see my screen right now? Yes, so I'm in Montreal, passionate about my city and its own biodiversity as an island. So the work I've did for 5 years was based in Myland neighborhood, densiest neighborhood of Montreal. You can see here the red dot, and we were working on that old train yard station along the train CP, Canadian Pacific train track. Really contaminated soil, vacant lot for 50 years, and right in the middle of an industrial area that is now totally revitalized, and about 14,000 square meter of vacant lot that became a wildscape in the middle of a really industrial area, and a lot of citizens had gathered to finally develop a a nonprofit organization to convince the borough to rezone the site as a natural site. So it's not that small, but it's not that big too. It's kind of, it's at the local scale, definitely. And so I think what this image talks a lot. So that place was kind of a hidden garden, secret garden for the community. And we worked for 5 years with the borough, and the agreement is still now on since 2013. So the site is now co-managed with the citizen group and the borough to establish one of the first little biodiversity conservation urban park. So I think one of the main great impact is definitely the fact that on a daily basis, citizens in the densiest neighborhood of Montreal can connect with nature. And this is probably, I think, the strongest aspect of that project, because we don't see in many of local urban parks in Montreal that amount of biodiversity that is really present. And that gives the opportunity to kids to connect with amazing and diverse insects that they are not used to see in the urban setting. We know that a lot of people don't even have access to a courtyard. So it's amazing when you can do that. And we even, and I'll share it after, but we even did an inventory of all the species. And we got a beautiful book we did with watercolors to connect and kind of inspire also the Mylanders, artist workers that are not that connected to nature in the area. We can think of Ubisoft workers that are kind of working on video games and not that connected to nature. So it's amazing when you can offer them. So I think it's not just useful for kids, but also for all range of people. One thing I see is that when we think of museum, the amazing impact of a real nature space beside your place is that you can touch things, you can discover stuff and work with it. And then so we've organized a bunch of activities for a different variety of communities so that they can connect to nature on a daily basis and discover things by their own or with specialists to open their mind and open their knowledge. I think nature at the small scale often also opportunities to gather, to be involved in our city, because that project was definitely an opportunity for citizens to be more involved in the decision and planning of a space. Even if the planning approach was to conserve all the species, you still have to work with the city so that it can be happen. And so last thing is that we've connected also with seniors and organized some activities to observe the stars. Sorry, some of the info is in French, but to make wishes, you know, when you look at the stars that are flying, and you can only do these things in spots where there are no lights. So when it's really biodiverse, so connecting seniors too. And finally, I think nature and biodiversity spaces and spots, as small as they are, have this impact to open the mind of perception of nature and to create beautiness and open to scenery that we are not that used to see in an urban context. So when you think of Myland, you think of bagels, you think of artists and coffees, but you don't think of these kind of landscapes. That's the power of urban biodiversity, I think. And last pictures, even a wedding happened in that spot. So just to show you where it can go, and we don't see often wedding in parks in Montreal. So I think that happened without permit, but I think that proves my point of opening the creativity and the opportunities of these spaces. So thank you.
Thank you, Caroline, and thank you to everyone. We did promise some extraordinary panelists, and you can see from all their creative work and all the way they've interlaced the arts, creativity, their activism and politics and science and research all into manifesting into these spaces. We have some wonderful, wonderful examples of how to challenge our norms. And I wanted to open to a conversation now, maybe with a first question. When we think of massive issues we're confronted with, like climate change and global biodiversity loss, speak to us a little bit about how these small-scale biodiversity projects are having impacts beyond their scale. Be that social or human health benefits, or ways of engaging people in environmental work, or supporting larger habitat networks. And I'll open the floor to you. Feel free to jump in, Marie.
Yeah, I could speak a little bit to that. That it was we've had a wonderful experience with people just feeling like they were attached to some place, and that they had a place, especially with the salmon returning, where they could have a good news story that they could work towards. Like, I feel like that some of the climate change narrative is so negative that it paralyzes people. So if you can get people involved in a small scale local project that they can be part of, they can be part of a good news story, which is just a more useful way of getting activism happening. Our Color Me Local dye garden, I didn't even put slides up of it, but we've been growing a garden full of flowers that you can dye fabric with. And this summer that was so well attended because it was outdoors. People could be there, they could see the effects of using plants, and it made quite a difference to people's mental health. Like the fact that we had these programs that could happen outdoors during COVID was really quite significant for people.
Yeah, I'd add to that in that, you know, I think we all have said in our work and shown images of the transformation that happens between attitudes and behavior, perception to doing. And, you know, in the work of the Ecological Design Lab and my students and I, we're very interested in working with communities, both for the discovery of individual community members and collective understanding that many hands make light work where connectivity is concerned. But a lot of our work focuses on making legible ecosystem processes that might otherwise be invisible or unknown or hidden in plain sight. And so whether it's through the work of other artists on our panel or the work of scientists together with community members, revealing and making legible helps build common understanding. When we have a common name and a common word or meaning for how something works, we can then identify it. And once we can name it and see it, we can probably care for it. So there is a transition from knowing to doing. And I think a lot of this happens in very simple, hands-on ways, from planting seeds. I think it was, Mahnaz mentioned, planting the seed in the ground is planting a seed in someone's mind. Whether it's an artwork and the participation in that artwork that is revelatory and connecting someone to place. These are all means of transforming someone's relationship to place, to an attitudinal and behavioral shift. And at the same time, it can be very empowering in a time of darkness and disillusionment. So I don't want to underestimate the importance of messaging around climate change and biodiversity crisis. These are very serious losses that affect all of us, but can also paralyze us. So the simple acts that scale together rather than scaling up are really critical. And I think that's where we see true transformation happen.
I'll quickly add as well, I agree absolutely with Nina Marie and Carmen. You know, having the pollinator mural come up, I actually didn't know about all the species that existed. I didn't even know half the names of all the bees and the pollinators. And it's become such an, it's a powerful tool just to get to know the names of, even a few of them. And they all used to look the same. I used to think they were flies or something. So it's so impactful just knowing what it is. And once you start getting to know your space, your, the biodiversity, the possibilities, when you start reimagining, I think that truly starts transforming the thought processes of people. And hopefully that's where then the shift starts coming in.
Thank you so much for your insights. We also wanted to ask, because of the multiple players involved in working in parks and public spaces, even private land, when we're talking about urban biodiversity, we're wondering if you could speak to us about some of the successful ways of engaging each of these players. So your city parks departments, homeowners, business improvement areas, schools, or private developers, and some meaningful ways to add biodiversity into each of their capacities, to bring it on their radar, to get them passionate about it, and what cities can do to make this easier. So I invite you to bring any examples or challenges that you've come across in this interdisciplinary work.
Well, maybe I can go quickly. So many things to say on that great question, but first of all, let's talk about the positive approach. So I think for Le Champ des Possibles and that Park Friends group, one of their biggest achievement was to get the borough's attention by building. First of all, being working all together and being informed and well informed and building a credibility, so that because often it's really complex subject. We're talking about perceptions here, we're talking about cultural behaviors, so it's sometimes tricky and complex for civil responsibility also to totally change an approach. With Les Amis du Champ des Possibles, we worked hard on BioBlitz, and we've created some tools that I've shared in the panel. I have here an example of a book we've created. And I think that was that really raised the credibility of the citizen movement, and it was in a way a really positive approach to show kind of the secret of and the knowledge by a concrete tool, and not just talking about great things, but having like some supports. So I think this is a good way to approach and to convince. And on the city side, I think what went pretty well in that project is that I think the politicians we were kind of lucky in that situation where we had political support. Sorry, but one thing that I think was great is that we've developed an agreement of co-management of the site, and that's a big step for a city to delegate the power and the responsibility to maintain a site. And so I think one great thing the city can do is to, for now, for example, in Montreal, is to share this agreement to other boroughs, so that through all around the city, even parks are little sites, are not managed by the same people. So it's great to share the tools and to support all the different municipals that have so much responsibility with tools that can help them, because we are all trying to do our best, but we need some help because sometimes these projects are complex. So
well, thank you, Caroline. And I know there's interest in your offer to share, if it's possible, this agreement.
So please, I've also put the link in the chat, and it's you can download it for free. It's a PDF.
That's great. If I may offer a follow-up. Thank you so much. The Champ des Possibles certainly figures as an excellent example in these kinds of community collaborative park making, place making, that are really about bringing people back to the relationship with a kind of urban wilderness. And I say that, one of the projects we're involved in is really helping communities to understand that these are collaborations, and our cities, as I illustrated in the example of my own property, our cities can be wonderfully empowered publicly for public space and green infrastructure, but fall short when it comes to really supporting individual citizens in their own actions to take responsibility, even if it's not their own property on a shared community co-op, a community garden, or sharing a yard with a neighbor. So sometimes the city needs to be pushed a little bit and this could be anybody's city, to step out of the way and revise bylaws or standards that actually stand in the way of human health and well-being and relationships to biodiversity. So there's that on the one hand. And then on the other, I think there's collaborative work with our cities to share those spaces in novel and different ways as we try to stay connected. And that's something that we're doing by looking to examples around the world. Toronto, for example, just became a partner city in the Biophilic Cities Network. We actually learned from Edmonton in this regard. Edmonton was the first Canadian city to join that partnership. And what we're finding is that this is a wonderful way to collaborate across the globe and look for examples in other cities that may offer inspiration and sometimes, frankly, the credibility that we need as individual citizens or communities to bring to our municipal leaders to show it is possible. And in fact, we ought to do this. So I'll put that link in the chat as well.
I would add persistence as one of the pieces, and to develop your allies in the parks, in the city infrastructure, in the cross boundary structures, so that you're supporting the people that are doing the good work internally in the governments, and then also pushing them. Still Creek actually crosses several boundaries, so I work with the city of Vancouver, but I also have to have relationships with the city of Burnaby and Metro Vancouver that covers the water across the regions, because watersheds don't always match the municipal boundary lines. So persistence and long-term relationship building with your allies that are in the government and supporting the people that get it so that they have more voice because they're backed by the citizens and the arts groups and whatever.
Carmen, I really like your point also on transectional or multidisciplinary, because I think one of the main learning I've got from that amazing project, Le Champ des Possibles, is that when we're talking about insects and birds and plants, we're not like, if we want to reach a greater audience, we have to go wider than only the environmentalist and the environment conversation. We have to open it. And so when we bring art in the conversation, we open the conversation so much, and then we open also the stakeholders, the allies, as you were saying. And so I'm getting back to that catalog, but that catalog was really strategic in our development, because we worked with artists so that we can connect with other audience, greater audience, that were definitely not aware of the fact that area was interesting for further than fashion shoots that people were doing there. Well, and other kind of, like, just to open the conversation to not just the environmentalists, and to connect all the stakeholders together. That's a really powerful way to help urban biodiversity conservation.
I'll just quickly also add that the projects that we worked on, both, starting the garden and the pollinator mural, I think initially we faced a lot of objections. And so without the support of the councillor, without the support of the city, Parks and Recs, we could not have gone forward with it. You need that support system to push things forward, because I think Caroline mentioned that, you have to have that partnership for outreach and from simplifying things. And we needed mediators. And I think initially park people helped us out a lot as well in mediating, because people, they don't use the ecological lens when they're looking at things. They cannot, you haven't reimagined the space. So it's very difficult to, reach out to them. And like a counselor says, it's easy to get people together for negative things, which I'm sure Nina Marie has faced. But when a positive change is coming, it's very difficult to visualize. And I'm just glad we had this support and this ongoing support. And with the school support, we have been able to move forward, though it seems every year gets slightly challenging, but always hopeful for the coming year.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, Mahnaz. It's very important to find ways to celebrate our achievements and our collaborations, to shine a light on how hard our allies within city government often do work to champion these projects, without which collaboration would never happen. And, this is one of the reasons that in the lab's work in training our future planning students, our planning professionals, we try really hard to visualize, amplify, and celebrate. Those are all key reasons that we remain mobilized and working within communities. And I think that's where the real work happens, frankly.
And if I may add, because I think that question is so interesting, but also if we want to get cities involved, knowing that in the coming years we will experience a recession and have the cities will have struggles investing money in parks and maintenance and new innovative approaches as biodiversity conservation. I think opening the conversation to public health and the health benefit of small-scale biodiversity, especially in this context of the pandemic, where we can't go really far from home. I think this will be a really, really strategic approach to using the health and the well-being benefit of urban biodiversity proximity projects.
Thank you so much. And also for tying this back to our current situation, where nature and our access to it on a local scale is of utmost importance. As a way of tying up our wonderful conversation together, I was hoping you could each thinking in the context of the pandemic, if you need, of local residents wanting to get involved and make an impact with small-scale urban biodiversity projects, what would you give them as a key takeaway, something to hold, something to follow, and as a way of really helping learn from what you've all been able to share, which is working like nature and crossing all of the disciplines that, you know, even the municipalities and larger structures that govern our urban spaces are unable to do because of silos. So if you would like to we have 5 minutes left in our conversation of a key takeaway for our audience.
Mine would be get your hands dirty, and you don't have to own a yard to do that. If it feels too burdensome to create something as dramatic or as large as a garden or a yard, engage with your neighbor, take down a fence. If you have a balcony, get some pots. I mean, they're really, that sounds incredibly immaterial and small, but that's the mighty part of it. And we do see such incredible engagement by people when there's the opportunity to I go back to Mahnaz's opening statement, to plant the seed. That's both with the hands and with the mind and the heart. And in a pandemic, that is actually an incredibly powerful action. We saw that in evidence already when I think the nursery trade was one of the most, I guess, economically successful trades we could see during the early days of the pandemic, when nurseries were sold out everywhere of everything faster than ever before. And if that wasn't revealing to us, I'm not sure what was. So get the hands dirty and join your local community group. And if you don't have a group, take down a fence, buy some pots. Borrow some pots, I should say.
That's great, Nina Marie. I think that's a really exciting prospect. So what we did in our garden, and I don't know, somehow maybe one of my visits at a camping site in Europe, I'd seen the huge sunflowers, and I just love sunflowers in our garden. So we have huge sunflowers, and that attracts a lot of people. And we've been giving away sunflower seeds and, you know, sunflower seedlings that come up. And even in my front yard, so what I did was, I have also taken over a lot of my front yard space, and I did it like, you know, surreptitiously, like small space, like one at a time. And my neighbors were amazing. Nobody raised a voice. I think once when I just filled the whole space with mulch, one of them was quite shocked. But then after that, when they saw how the transformation took place, they were really supportive. And now I've got a few, you know, species growing here. So like just encouraging people, giving away, you know, things for them to plant, and just to show, I think, showcasing your whatever potential there is to reimagine the space. I think that's important for me.
Yeah, I would second what Mahnaz and Nina Marie said. My husband actually cut the lawn off of our yard as soon as we moved in and started gardening it. And now that's the new normal. Like at first everybody was shocked, but now my neighbor has her vegetable garden in the front yard because there's more light. Other neighbors have taken off large parts of their lawn. And so it actually changed what was standard on our street to be daring to actually do that. So it is a great way. And persistence, that's the other takeaway, is persistence for sure.
I don't know what to add, because I agree so much with what everyone said. So maybe really personally, for me, the pandemic was an opportunity to go grow for the first time of my adult era to grow a garden with my dad that is living alone. And so I think it's an opportunity to really connect with people that are close to you, or that are close physically because of the neighborhood. So yeah, I agree with Nina Marie on get your hands dirty. It really helps, and just try to grow stuff. Just try, and then we're learning a lot through that on so many levels. And for me, the main thing was also to convince cities to see biodiversity conservation as an opportunity and not as a constraint. And this is a challenge, but I think it comes from small positive experience and stories. So small stories that are successful because they are easy to create. I'll say it that way.
Well, thank you so much. I know we promised a dynamic group of panelists, and you've certainly made my job easy by bringing such great perspectives to this conversation. And I thank you all also for taking, this wildly complex work and all of the importance and the impacts of working on urban biodiversity and layering in the politics and just boiling it all down to the advice of just do it, just plant. And that's the magic of nature, that it's just up to us to help carve out spaces for it to work its magic.
Maybe, Kelsey, I have one other thing to add, if I may. I think for those who are not necessarily able to have access to a space and having, for myself, recently experienced restriction in mobility, I'm just thinking that another way to connect with nature and biodiversity is just to do to look at pictures and do watercolor of it, or to try to learn about plants. So if you can't, for those who can't, I think we have to think of this reality too. For those who can't go on site, there are other ways to learn and to know about the complexity and the amazing infinity knowledge of plants. So that's it.
Thank you so much for adding that piece for those of us that are unable to get outside in these trying times. It's so true. I'm going to pass the microphone back to Molly because I promised to keep us on time, and I can't thank you enough to all of you for bringing your stories, your expertise, sharing all these amazing links and resources. And we have shared ways to follow up with each of your amazing projects for our national audience.